I think about some of the conversations, some of the rhetoric when it comes to some of the charismatic spaces when they talk about revival and moves of God. And I'm not here to talk to you about that today. But sometimes I get a little bit concerned because there's so much talk about the good old days that you wonder, what is God doing now? What does he plan to do in our midst? And it was a glorious beginning, but it's gonna be an even more glorious finish. And the shaking right now just proves that there's something coming forth. That the shaking is meant to refine you and it is meant to bring a treasure forth from your life. Good morning, y'all. How are we feeling this morning? Good. The kiddos are going back to school. It could be a stressful time. There's a lot of things needed, a lot of last minute details, all the things. I also work at a school. I'm not technically a teacher. I'm a coach. And so this week is our first week starting. And so my team, they're super excited to be back on campus. And they're excited for Hell Week coming up. It's kind of funny because I'm here about to talk to you about the Lord, but let me tell you about Hell Week. For those of you that participated in sports at a varsity high school level, you understand that Hell Week traditionally is a week where you're kind of ingrained back into conditioning and we're getting them ready for season. And I make little kids cry. I will just put it that way. It's one of those things. It's funny because I got to turn into kind of a different persona because a lot of these kids, the school that I work at is... I will say it's a privileged school. It costs close to about $60,000 a year to go there. And some of you guys are like, good Jesus, that's expensive. Yes, it's very expensive. So a lot of these kids, you're not just dealing with their parents, you're dealing with their nannies and their mannies and their housekeepers and, you know, all the things. So for some of these kids, I'm the only hard no that they get in their life, you know? So they're trying to get away. I blow my whistle. That's it. Get on the line. Let's go. It's time to run. So I'm about to turn into coach here very soon. Today I get to have my teacher hat on, and I'm excited to be here. It's been such an honor and blessing to be here with you guys every month for the last couple of months. And Jen and Hona, I adore them. They're some of my favorite people in the entire world. And I'm so stoked for them. I'm so stoked for us today. So, signs of the times. This morning, I am speaking on what I have titled Sink Now, Swim Later. The way that I'm wired is I'm constantly searching for meaning. I'm searching for context of the things that are going on around us. What we're seeing play out across our country, across our phones, across TVs is interesting to say the least. And last week, I was reminded of a passage in Haggai. Haggai is a minor prophet. The book is only about 2 chapters. It's easy to miss if you're just scrolling through. But to give you a little bit of context, for 70 years, Israel, the children of God, they've been in Babylonian exile. They've been displaced, oppressed, cut off from their homeland. And during this time, if there was anyone that ever deserved a word of stability, it was them. If anyone had earned a season of calm waters, it was these people who've been beat up for generations. And so what happens is in Haggai chapter 2, verse 3, God is speaking through his prophet, and he's asking them, he says, hey, is there anyone who saw the temple the way that it used to be? And when you look at this temple now, how does it look to you? Does it look like it's nothing? And what they're referring to is the Temple of Solomon. It was grandiose, it was magnificent, it was extravagant, it was all the things. And what's happening in this moment is this moment of comparison. It's looking back and saying, our good old days were amazing. But when we look about what's happening now, it looks as if there's nothing. Which leads you to the question to ask, are my best days behind me? Is our best days behind us? And in this moment, the Lord has a chance to speak a word of stability to them. And instead, this is what he says in verse 6. He says, for I declare to you very soon, I'm going to send to you a season of shaking. That's the wild part. God says, I'm going to send you a season of shaking. Imagine living under 70 years of oppression. The word that you would want to hear God is say, behold, I send you a season of stability. Instead, he says, I'm sending more shaking. I'm going to shake the nations. I'm going to shake the air, the water, the earth, the sea, all of these things. And to me, this is so often how life with God works, right? Once you think you've hit a bottom, you realize that there's further, deeper to go. You're like, God, I need stability. And he says, I'm sending more shaking. You think you've weathered the last wave, and then you realize that there's another wave on the horizon. Right now, you don't need discernment to see that we are living in a cultural moment of shaking. Political systems are shaking. Church systems and church leaders are shaking. Financial systems are shaking. And it's not just the storms that we're seeing play out there. It's instability in homes, jobs, health, relationships. And for some of us, if you've walked with God for a while, you know that for some, the gospel was sold to us as this sort of exemption from storms of life, almost that you were going to be insulated from the shakings. And so God never promises people exemption from the storm. He only promises that his presence will be with us in it. So here's the difference. The world and the people of God, we are going to experience the shakings. We're going to experience the storms of life. But for the people of God, there is a unique purpose in the midst of the shaking. And this is what he says in verse 7. He says that I am going to shake every nation, but the treasures of the nations will flow in, and I will fill this temple with glory. In other words, the shaking that we're experiencing is not random. It's refining. And it's the same waves that make you sink are the same ones that throw out the illusions and the props that you've leaned on until all that's left is what's real, what's true, and what's eternal. Because everything that God does for his people is not just for his people, but it's for the sake of the world. That there are treasures inside of you that can only come out in the shaking. So when we look at what's happening, understand that there is a purpose behind it. And I feel like I shouldn't even need to have this disclaimer. I don't believe that God sends hardships. I don't believe he sends bad health. I don't believe he sends the storms, but I believe that he uses the storms and the shakings in our life. Amen? So the same shaking that rattles the nations in God's hands can release faith and resilience and joy from within you. And he goes on to say this in verse 9. He says that the temple that you guys once saw and you've heard all these legendary stories about, it's going to pale in comparison to this new temple. That the glory that you found in the former will not compare to the latter glory that's going to take place in your midst. And he says this, he says, the temple is going to end up far better than it started out. It was a glorious beginning, but it'll have an even more glorious finish. Come on, somebody. And it says, a place in which I will hand out wholeness and holiness. I think about some of the conversations, some of the rhetoric when it comes to some of the charismatic spaces when they talk about revival and moves of God. And I'm not here to talk to you about that today. But sometimes I get a little bit concerned because there's so much talk about the good old days that you wonder, what is God doing now? What does he plan to do in our midst? And it was a glorious beginning, but it's going to be an even more glorious finish. And the shaking right now just proves that there's something coming forth. That the shaking is meant to refine you, and it is meant to bring a treasure forth from your life. So Haggai, he talks about the shaking is coming, and the thing that I really want to unpack today is found in Matthew, where he shows us the storm. And to me, shaking and storms are very similar. To me, a storm is just shaking with water in your face. So I'd like to take us through a text that I believe is going to speak to us with some powerful principles. We're here in Matthew 14. We're going to read about 11 verses here, and then we're going to unpack this today. All right? You guys ready? Yeah. Let's do this. It says this, verse 22, as soon as the people were fed, Jesus told his disciples to get into the boat and to go to the other side of the sea while he stayed behind to dismiss the people. After the crowds dispersed, Jesus went up into the hills to pray, and as night fell, he was there praying alone. But the disciples, who were now in the middle of the sea, ran into trouble, for their boat was tossed about by high winds and heavy waves. At about 4 o'clock in the morning, that is always such a random time, right? God always wakes you up in the middle of the night around 3 and 4. Is that just me? Okay, I was about to say, I was like, okay, cool. I'm just different, I guess. It says at about 4 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came to them walking on the waves. When the disciples saw him walking on top of the water, they were terrified and screamed, "A ghost." And then Jesus said, "Be brave and don't be afraid. I am here." Peter shouted, "Lord, if it's really you, then have me join you on the water." "Come and join me," Jesus replied. So Peter stepped out into the water and he began to walk towards Jesus. But then when he realized how high the waves were, he became frightened and started to sink. "Save me, Lord," he cried. Jesus immediately stretched out his hand and lifted him up and said, "What little faith you have. Why would you let doubt win?" And the very moment they both stepped onto the boat, the raging wind ceased. And then all the disciples bowed down before him and worshiped Jesus. They said in adoration, "You are truly the Son of God." I think in order for us to appreciate what any of these stories are telling us, you have to understand the context in which these stories are taking place in. Matthew 14 is such an incredible chapter to me. If you've been here any of the previous months that I've spoke here, I've actually spoke on different scenes from Matthew 14. So this feels kind of like the last final piece to Matthew 14. That the scene opens up with grief. John the Baptist, the one who was the voice crying out in the wilderness, the one who baptized Jesus, has just been beheaded. And this isn't just a personal loss for Jesus, that being family to him. It's politically dangerous. Herod has made it clear that if he's going to kill the prophet, he might kill the Messiah next. The disciples, they find themselves in a place where they are drained. They have just fed thousands of people. They're healing the sick. They're navigating political tension. And now they're grieving. And then in the midst of this, Jesus sends them into the boat, into the middle of the sea, and that's where the storm finds them. This translation declares that it's at 4 a.m. Most scholars and historians would believe it's somewhere between the 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. window. And in this place, they're rowing against the wind, they're rowing against the waves, they are exhausted, they are fearful. And here's the kicker. They're exactly where Jesus wanted them to be. If you've walked with God for a while, you know this, that us believers, we aren't exempt from the storms of life. Unfortunately, it's not like Christians get less cancer, Christians don't get into less car accidents, and Christians don't lose jobs and marriages. If anything, the promise is never exemption from the storms of the life. It's only God's presence in them. And sometimes the storms in your life come to you not because you've strayed, but actually because you've obeyed. And some of you might need to hear that this morning, that the storm that you are currently in, that you are facing, is not because you've backslided. It's not because God is holding some petty grudge over you and he's mad at you. It's because you have been obedient and you are exactly where you need to be. The disciples were sent to this place in the middle of the sea, and where they were sent, they were met with a storm. And they're here in this boat, this small boat, and it's heavy. And some of you, maybe you feel like that. Maybe you feel like you are at a place in your life right now where you are a small boat in a big sea, and there are waves all around you, and you feel the weight of that. These disciples, they are feeling that emotional weight of personal grief. They lost a legend in their community. They are physically exhausted after this night-long struggle against wind and waves. And in the midst of all of this, we see this: Peter stepping out of the boat, leaving his comfort zone. And it's important to note that Peter's step out onto the water is not just about courage. This is about trust in the middle of political chaos, grief, and personal exhaustion. But when the wind grows boisterous, fear overtakes him and he begins to sink. And it's always interesting that in those seasons of your life where you begin to sink, I know for me, in those seasons of my life where the storm is heavy, well-meaning people have given me the worst possible advice. It's the people who mean well, who just give you the worst advice. It's the people who don't have the qualifications to give you life advice that open up with hey man, no disrespect. And you know they're about to say something mad disrespectful. This is what happens in the storms of your life. You're like, nope, don't subscribe, unfollow. Don't talk to me. I will make it through this. And we've all been told at some point in our life to keep your head above the water. It's ingrained in us that somehow going under is a sign of failure. And for Peter, he realizes something very quick that I want you to grasp today, is that faith doesn't float in safety. It walks into the storm. Faith doesn't float in safety. It walks into the storm. Which leads me here to number one, is for you and I to step out and let life wreck you. Some of you are like, oh, no, I don't want that. No, thank you. It's like one of those things sometimes when you hear worship songs and it's like really bold lyrics and secretly you're not singing them because you're like, I just don't want to declare this over my life right now, Lord. Step out and let life wreck you. Peter steps out of the boat as an act of courage, but he quickly realizes that he's powerless against the wind and the waves. He sinks, and he has to sink in order for him to learn that Christ is the one who actually sustains him. And this is the paradox of faith, right? Safety feels like the boat, but the presence of Jesus is outside of it. The boat is familiar, it's manageable, it's predictable, and these are the things that faith isn't grown by. Your faith is not dictated upon what's predictable, what's manageable, and what's conventional. Faith walks towards the one who's bidding us to come walk on the water with him. Life is wild, and life will wreck you. And life oftentimes brings us to situations. It brings us to things. And the whole point of that is to get us to a place where we realize that our old patterns of control fail us. And this is what life is trying to show you. Oftentimes, God comes to you disguised as your life. Jesus is telling Peter to come. Acts 27, there's a little story. This is Paul actually. Paul is shipwrecked on Malta. And there's a situation, they're in this boat, they're in this storm, and Paul has to encourage everybody on board. He's saying, hey, listen, this is what's gonna happen. The cargo, all the things that we have on here, including the ship, this is all going down, but your life will be spared. Many times I think about that ship, and I think about what does that ship represent for so many of us? So many of us, it represents these beliefs that we've become so accustomed with. It might represent old control patterns in your life. It might represent false beliefs maybe that you've had about the Lord. And those things and that ship can only get you so far in life, and life comes and that ship has to go down in order for you to go to where God is calling you to. The old ship that got you here to you in this moment can't get you to the next season of your life. And sometimes that ship has to go down, but you won't lose your life. Peter, stepping out was only the first move for him. And like you and I, sooner or later, the waves are gonna rise in our life higher than what our faith feels. And that's when you start to go under. But here's the good news. Sometimes going under is exactly where the miracle happens. Because faith in your life isn't about staying dry, it's about daring to get wet. I've heard so many sermons time and time again on Matthew 14, and the biggest thing is hating on Peter's faith, or his lack of faith. They talk about his doubt. That's not what I'm here to talk to you about. I believe that his failure wasn't in that he sank. His failure would have been if he never stepped out of the boat. Some of us, we're afraid to sink, and the truth is you haven't even stepped out of the boat. Jesus is saying, come, walk on the water. And you can't walk on the water if you don't step out of the predictable, the manageable, the conventional. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is to risk the storm. And maybe some of you right now in this moment, you feel the heaviness of all the political chaos. Maybe some of you are grieving, just like the disciples after John the Baptist's death. And maybe some of you are just exhausted. It feels like you've been rowing against the wind and the waves and you have nothing to show for it. And in the midst of all of that, the call is the same for you as it was for Peter. That is to leave the familiar, step into the storm, and discover Jesus there. Because when it comes to it, we step out to follow, but we sink to be formed. Stepping out is an act of courage, but sinking is surrender. Peter's first miracle was that he was walking on the water, but I am here to tell you today that his deepest miracle was actually that he sunk. The first miracle was him walking, but the deepest miracle was him sinking. His walking had to show him how courageous he was, but the sinking showed him his limits. And that's where grace does its best work. It's not when you're impressive on top of the water, but it's when you're honest underneath the water. So, point 2, sinking isn't failure, it is formation. Number 2, sink deep. The truth is that you can't swim in grace until you have sunk in surrender. You cannot swim in grace until you have sunk in surrender. Sinking is the gateway to surrender. And we got to think about this too. Peter, as a fisherman, he would have been a better than average swimmer. So it would have been easy for him. This is a guy who has managed many storms before, but he now reached a storm in his life that he couldn't outswim. And so instead of trying to outswim the waves, he cries out, "Lord, save me." And to me, this is that deep spiritual truth. This is the realization that I cannot do this on my own. Last week, I was doing something very dangerous. I was trying to clean out the miscellaneous drawer in our kitchen. You know, it's that one drawer we all have that has like Band-Aids, half-dead batteries. It's got random coins. And for us, there is a set of keys that we do not know what it belongs to, but we don't have the courage to throw it away because what if these keys belong to like a safe of gold and I get to retire early in Italy, you know? And so we won't throw them away because we don't know what they belong to, but they're important, you know? And then we also have, there's like this stack of insurance cards and most of them are expired. But it's one of those things like, I'm gonna keep this because I may need to prove to somebody that I had dental coverage in 2018. So I'm going through all these layers of this drawer and I found something that I hadn't seen in a while. And that was my grandfather's James Alcoholics Anonymous 45-year sobriety coin. And in that moment, all this random clutter fades into the background and I held that coin and I was reminded of his life. I was reminded of his courage to admit his own powerlessness over alcohol. The years of struggle before that moment, the humility it took in this strong man to ask for help. That coin didn't just represent 45 years of him not having a drink. It represented a man who had drowned, who had hit a bottom, and he had learned to swim again. It represented a legacy of strength and surrender that continues to shape my family for generations. That coin for my grandfather represented a man who didn't try and outswim his addiction. It came from a man who learned how to cry out, "Lord, save me." From a man who admitted, like Peter, that I cannot do this on my own. And it's in that moment, it's in your powerlessness that becomes a doorway for God's power to show up in your life. This is a spiritual path. The spiritual path always begins with powerlessness, not self-sufficiency. This is what Richard Rohr means when he says this, and we got this quote up. Until you bottom out and come to the limits of your own fuel supply, there is no reason for you to switch to a higher octane of fuel. You will not learn to actively draw upon the larger source until your usual resources are depleted. This is so good. Richard Rohr, man, banger after banger. Peter sinks, my grandfather bottomed out, and sooner or later, you and I will find ourselves there too. And the miracle for you and I is not in avoiding the storm, but it's in discovering the hand that pulls us out when we go under. The bottom line of the gospel is this, that most of us kind of have to hit a bottom before we even start the real spiritual journey. The bottom line is you have to hit a bottom in order for this thing to really truly start for you and I. So Peter saying, "Lord, save me," to me is the equivalent of step 1 in AA. It's the admitting we were powerless against alcohol. Maybe it's not alcohol for you, but we're all addicts in some sense. What is it that you're powerless over in your life? And it's admitting that powerlessness. In step 2 in AA, it says that we came to believe that there was a power greater than ourselves that could restore us to sanity. That's powerful. It's admitting in the powerlessness, and it's coming to discover the greater power than yourself that could restore you. So Peter, he walks out on the water. He notices how strong the storm is, and he begins to sink. There came a point where he had to stop fighting. He had to just let go, thrashing oftentimes and fighting to stay afloat for us, trying to regain control, oftentimes is the thing that keeps us from grace in our own life. Transformation begins with that acknowledgement, that deep recognition, realization that I can't do this on my own, and submitting yourself to the will of God. So you see, that sinking wasn't Peter's finish line, it was his starting line. That until your strength runs out, grace can never hold you. And that's where we step into this next truth, number 3. Grace is found in the depths. I have discovered in my life that grace works best underwater. The hand of grace is the hand that saves us, and it's always reaching below the surface in our life. It says that as soon as Peter cried out, it says that Jesus immediately grabbed his hand. This grace, this rescue is a pure gift. It's not something that's earned. Grace meets us at our lowest point and our strongest. For those of you that know, I grew up in a very Christian household. I mean, both my parents are in ministry. I was basically raised in the church nursery. Prayer groups, check, I was there. Youth ministries, absolutely. Bible studies, yes, I was there. If you were coming to church, I was probably the one opening up the door and welcoming you in. And as much as I love to see God move on Sundays and throughout these various meetings during the week, the craziest things always happened at youth summer camp. And some of you are laughing because we could probably go out to lunch and share these horror stories of everything that happened at youth summer camp. And it's one of those things, right? Like you take a busload of curious teenagers, you throw in some puberty, a few deep theological doubts, and then questionable food. Like, come on now, this is a recipe for some spiritual chaos and some hilarity. And so one year we had a lake day, and I'm a young middle school kid. And Lake Day means this is your chance to impress the other side of the camp, right? And so you had a bunch of these young boys doing push-ups in their room, trying to get a, quote, pump before we got onto the shore. And at this Christian camp, it was very modest, so girls weren't allowed to wear 2-piece bathing suits unless they covered it up with like a baggy shirt. So it's just a hilarious sight on the shore. You got all these boys with baby muscles, and then you got all these girls with baggy tees on. And so in the midst of all of this, there's always that group of guys who are just trying to show just how strong they are. It's still that little kid of like, look how fast I am. Look how high I can jump. And this one was, look how far I can swim. And so all of these boys, they've been spending their summers trying to be Michael Phelps. And they challenge everybody. They're like, listen, we're going to swim all the way out to the buoys in the middle of the lake. Brandon, come on, join us. I'm not a swimmer. Listen. But I looked athletic, so they were like, yeah, you could do it. So I was like, yeah, I could do it. And I'm feeling like, it's a chance to show off some bravado, and not to mention my summer camp crush is over there on the shore watching. And nothing says potential soulmate like risking your life for a show of bravado. So we all dive in. I'm swimming. My swimming form is not good. And I'm like, man, I'm working way too hard right now. I could see off in the distance. I'm almost there at the buoy. I get to the buoy, and I start swimming back. And I look up, and I realize that all these guys who I had started this race with were already on the shore doing victory laps. And I'm swimming, and all of a sudden, clear as day realization, I'm not going to make it to the shore. And I am doing God knows what. Arms are flailing. I'm kicking. I'm gasping for breath. And I could start to feel my body get tight, and I start yelling for help. My body is starting to go under. I don't have enough energy. I'm getting my head above the water. Help! I'm coming back under. I'm coming back up. Help! And it dawns on me, this is the way I go out. This is how it happens. I drowned at Christian summer camp. So this moment happens in slow motion. I don't have enough energy in my body to swim anymore, and I am too far to get back to the buoy. And I realize in this moment that I am completely letting go. Everything is moving in slow motion, and next thing I know is I feel a hand grabbing my arm. A girl from camp had seen me. She pulls me up, and in the most calm, loving, caring, tender voice, "Brandon, I got you." And she starts towing me back to the shore, completely unfazed. It was like this girl in this XXL shirt, she was waiting for this moment to come and save somebody. And it happened to be me. So we get to the shore. I lay on my back. I'm staring at the sky. I'm grasping for air. And I realized, man, that little girl just saved my life. And no, if you're wondering, me and my summer camp crush, we did not end up together. But I learned something very valuable that day. And that is this, that sometimes you have to sink before you can be saved. And oftentimes your Savior will come to you in the most unexpected form. Grace, the grace of God, it works in our powerlessness. When we stop trying to control everything on the surface, that's when grace and God can act in our life. Jesus, he caught Peter immediately. Grace is something that I realized that day is grace is not something you earn, it's something you allow. There could have been a moment as a young middle school boy to think, man, I ain't gonna let no little girl save me. And instead, it was one of these things I couldn't have been more happy to see her in her XXL t-shirt grab me and pull me to shore. That's grace, right? When you're still going under, that's when it grabs you. The thing that I've realized at different points in my life in the storm is that the depths underwater teach you things that the shallow waters could never. The depths can teach you things that the shallow waters could never. In the depths, this is the thing, you can't rely on old air. Old air for me represents old certainties and self-sufficiency. That when you are underwater sinking, you have to learn a new way to live. That you are learning how to breathe grace instead of control. This is why, to me, sinking isn't failure. It's initiation. When Peter sinks, grace pulls him up. But notice this, that Peter had to go down before he could be lifted up. And that's not just his story. This is the Pascal pattern. It is this, that the way down in the kingdom is always the way up. It's death before resurrection, it's sinking before swimming, and it is brokenness before wholeness. So, sink now so that you can swim with purpose later. And this leads us to number 4, and we're gonna close soon. And it is this, 4, that death leads to new life. The sinking that you experience and the sinking that you give into, it allows you to swim with purpose later. I mentioned earlier the Pascal pattern. It's a classic pattern of descent and ascent. It's loss and renewal. And this term actually, the Pascal mystery, most of you will probably be familiar with this. It was coined by St. Augustine. And its term, the Pascal mystery, it refers broadly to Christ's death, resurrection, and his glorification. But it's this, is that there is always death before resurrection. So Peter's story here is literally mirroring that truth. That he descends before being lifted up. And I think about this, death brings about new life. What is it that has to die in you? Is it an old identity? Is it a lie? Is it your victimhood? What is that thing that has to die in you that the Lord is trying to use this sinking moment in your life that out of this new life can emerge? We see this Pascal pattern played out time and time again in scriptures. We find this in Jesus' journey, right? Jesus, he empties himself. He takes on the form of a humble servant. He's obedient unto death, and then he's resurrected. For Joseph, he was betrayed, enslaved, imprisoned, and then Joseph, we know his story, that he's now elevated to a place of power where he can save nations. We see this played out in what we were talking about today in Peter walking on the water. He has to sink in weakness before being lifted up by Jesus. Spiritually, I love this because the Pascal pattern to me shows us that loss in your life is not the end. It is the doorway to transformation. That this thing helps reframe suffering and failure and change as the actual necessary steps to a deeper life with Jesus. If I could get worship team up here, that'd be awesome. I'm about to land the plane, y'all. Step out, sink deep. Grace is found in the depths, and death brings new life. Before there's a new strength in your life, there has to be a deeper surrender in your heart. Sink now, to me, this visual is so, it's jarring, it's graphic, and it's good. This reminds me of what does it mean to sink now? To me, it's the deeper thing of letting go. True Christianity has never been about addition. It's always been about subtraction. It's learning how to let go. And the people who are really mature in this thing are the people who have gotten really good at learning how to let go. What is that for you? Is it letting go of old identities, old lies, old hurts, old doubts? What is it letting go? What does it mean? Does it mean for you in your life? That means embracing humility, descending into the depths of your own vulnerability. It could symbolize dying to self. But this is the thing about sinking. It's like baptism, that you willingly enter the waters. Sink now, but swim later. That after that surrender and after this moment where you begin to find grace in the depths that you didn't know existed, you rise with renewed strength and clarity. I remember that moment last week, finding my grandfather's James AA 45-year sobriety coin. It's a single piece of metal that carries decades of grace. To me, it's more than just this thing that you could hold in your hands. To me, this is a tangible proof that sometimes you have to drown before you can breathe again. It's proof that surrender isn't the end in your life. It's actually just the beginning. My grandfather, his life was torn apart in his younger years, in his first marriage, by his addiction to alcohol. And it hurt a lot of people. Relationships were severed, families torn apart, a lot of things happened. And again, he had to have this moment where the drowning and the waves got so bad around him, where he had to learn how to admit, I need help. Lord, save me. I can't help but think of me, a young middle school kid at church camp. I'm trying to impress my little summer crush. I dove in with the others, but I soon realized that I was way in over my head. I'm flailing, I'm gasping, I'm panicking. Nobody saw me, or at least that's what I thought. And this is it. This was the moment I was going to drown at camp. Until, I don't even remember her name. She pulls me up. Brandon, I got you. I didn't save myself. Someone else pulled me to the shore. If you look back in your life in those moments in the storms that you made it through, you realize that I didn't save myself. Someone else pulled me to the shore. And this is Peter's story too. He steps out on the water, he sinks, and just when he knows he can't hold it together anymore, Jesus grabs him. Think about this. I look back at my life, and there's so many testimonies that I could share with you over and over again. In the moments where I didn't have it together, in the moments where I was completely in over my head, that's right, the precise moment when Jesus grabs me. So friends, hear me out today. Your faith does not float in safety. Your faith steps out into storms, and you will step out and life will wreck you. You will sink deep, but it is in the sinking deep that grace will meet you there. And here's the good news, that the God who meets you in the depths, he doesn't leave you there. That the same hand that pulls you out from under the water is the same hand that teaches you how to swim. Oftentimes in the kingdom, it's depth before direction. Some of you are trying to figure out, where is this? What is the next step for me? Where is it that I need to go? And the waters tell you to come deeper. Richard Rohr, I mentioned earlier, he says, until you bottom out and come to the limits of your own fuel supply, there is no reason for you to switch to a higher octane of fuel. It's so good. Until you bottom out. This is a starting point. It's not the finishing line for you. And so that's what I came to tell you today, is that there are treasures inside of you, that this season of shaking and the storms that you're experiencing in your life, there are things inside of you that can only come out as a result of this moment here now for you. So take heart, step out of the boat, don't fear the storm, Let the waves take you under if they must, because the same Christ who called Peter is the same Christ who calls you, and it is the same Christ who will lift you up. And when he does, you won't just survive, but you'll swim with a strength that you never knew you had. And that's the gospel. Sink now and swim later. If you could, bow your heads. Lord, I thank you. I thank you for your grace. I thank you that your presence is with us in the storms and the shakings. That these things that we're going through, these things that we're seeing even take place across our nation. It's easy these days to have such a heavy heart. With all the things going on in the middle of political chaos, in the middle of some of our lives dealing with grief, and some of us just personally exhausted. This summer was supposed to be a time for us to get away and to relax and to recoup and to recharge. And for some of you, it's been the exact opposite. This has been one of the most draining summers that you've ever had. And you were hoping to go into the fall. Maybe it's a new job. Maybe it's a new opportunity for you. Maybe it's a new role at this place that you've been at. And you were hoping to go in with some strength. And right now, it just feels like you're sinking. You're sinking. Maybe there's bad health. There's a severed relationship. Maybe there's bills and debts that you just feel that you are just drowning in. And I've come this morning to encourage you is to let go. Sink deep. Because right now where you're at, it says that Jesus immediately, he is not waiting to rescue you. He's there. As soon as Peter cried out, Lord, save me. His admission of saying, I can't do this on my own. I need help. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I. That I've come to my own limits. And it's there where you find grace in the depths, that you realize that you're not swimming alone. And when you come back out of the water, you're going to swim again, but you're going to swim as a different person. Lord, I thank you that what you're going to do in our lives is going to far surpass what we thought were our best days behind us. When you spoke through Haggai and you talked about the new temple, it says that you were going to fill that place with your glory. That maybe this next season of your life, friend, is going to be filled with the glory of God. That the shaking has felt strong, but the treasure that is going to emerge as a result of this is going to be that much stronger. You're going to shine like you never have before. You're going to walk with a strength that you never knew you had. The resilience, the joy that you're going to feel and have is going to far surpass anything that you've ever had before. You're going to walk with a renewed clarity, a renewed purpose, a grit even. And I want to do this morning. Maybe there's some of you here today that you've never given over the keys of your life to Jesus. You've never given him your heart. And I want to do that this morning. I want to give an altar call. If there's any of you in here and you've never given your life to Jesus, and you're hearing what I'm saying today, and you're realizing I am at a place in my life that I can't do this on my own, I want you to just slip up your hand, and I want to pray with you and lead you in a prayer. If you're here today and you're saying, I've never given my life to Jesus, that's awesome. I see your hand, I see your hand, I see your hand. That's incredible. I want us to all join in here in this moment. Again, I'm going to lead you through a prayer. And it's nothing that this prayer is magical or special, but it is this thing of realizing and admitting that you can't do this on your own. So I want everybody to join me. Jesus, I thank you for your gift of salvation, which you purchased on the cross years ago. I'm here today, and I admit that I can't do this on my own. I need you. I give you over the keys to my life. Lord, please forgive me of any sins that I've committed against you. I thank you that your blood washes me clean. I accept your gift of salvation into my heart. And I thank you that you call me yours, that I am a child of God. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.